Explaining Intergenerational Conflict When Adult Children and Elderly Parents Live Together by Jill Suter and Carl Pilmer. So in this article, they started by talking about how there's been a very large increase in the interest of in research about family relation when adult children continue to live or return to live in a parental home. And there's been an increase in interest on this subject due to the rising amount of adult children who are living or returning to live in the parental home. They go on to say that although there are several papers and several literature on the relations between parents and co-residential adult children, that there has been only one empirical investigation on this subject to date, and this was Clemens to Axelson. He says that the purpose of this present study is to extend the investigation and the literature on the intergenerational conflict when adult children share residence with elderly parents. Specifically, they're going to examine the extent and the correlation of intergenerational conflict in co-residential families of elderly parents who share their home with an adult child. So that's basically what the whole article is about. They go on to say that given the lack of empirical research on family relations when adult children live in co-reside in the elderly parent's home, they have drawn upon the broader literature on intergenerational relations to frame the present analysis. So basically what that means is they're using the previous research to kind of construct this research. So they start talking about research of social structure positions, and they say that although the literature on social structure positions has focused upon the dependency of parents as a major determinant of the quality of parent-adult-child co-residency and relationship, that other potential important variables emerge from the broader literature on interpersonal relations on this subject. Then they're going to talk about marital status, and they say how a lot of researchers have found that one of the most consistent findings in their studies of intergenerational relations is an increase in closeness in parent-child relationship when children begin to share a larger number of adult statuses with their parents. They go on to say that research on the effects of marital status similarly has been conducted almost exclusively with parents and children who did not share a residence, though. So that's like a gap in that specific type of literature. Then talking about the child's age, Then talking about the child's age, they go on to say that researchers have constructed theories of adult development and intergenerational relations that have led them to the acceptation that the child's age would be negatively related to the parent-child conflict, and that previous literature has related changes that are likely to reduce difference between parents and adult children than minimizing the basis for conflicts between them. Then they start talking about gender, and they say how in previous literature it suggests that the gender of both the parent and the child can affect intergenerational relations, and that studies of the effect in gender consistently demonstrate a stronger affectional ties between mothers and daughters than any other combination. So then after saying all of this and talking about each of these little topics, they go on to say that the literature on family relations in general that they have reviewed has led them to anticipate like the results of this own study, and the result and that conflict between resident and adult children and their elderly parents would be at least. So basically, they've taken the previous literature that they've just discussed and they've just been talking about, and that's how they kind of constructed and created their hypothesis for this literature. So in their article, because of previous literature, they expect to, one, for the parent, that they expect and anticipate that conflicts between the parent and the child and the resident adult child with their elderly parent would be the least, like there would be the least amount of conflict between the elderly parent and the resident adult child when the parent is in good health. One, when the parent is in good health. Two, when the child and the parent are occupied with the same or similar marital status, and when the child, when the parent was less dependent upon the adult child, and when the child is older. In addition, they also anticipate that the least conflict would be found in mother to daughter dyads, followed by mother son dyads, and then father daughter dyads, and then father son dyads. And now onto the methods. So in this study, the data was collected between September 1985 and February 1986 in the Boston metropolitan area as a part of a larger study of the family relations of the elderly. So in this data, it was a random sample was drawn of persons 65 years of age and older listed in the 1985 published town list. And then once the elders from this list were identified, they were classified on the basis of their living arrangement. So basically, if they lived alone, or if they lived with a spouse, or if they lived with an adult child, or with just a young child. So that's how they were classified. And this is how they used to decrease and smallen the sample group. The samples were drawn from each of these categories, with oversampling for persons living with spouses and or adult children. And this procedure resulted in a final eligible sample of 2,813 people. And then out of these 2,813 people, 372 of them were used in this paper to analyze data. And those 372 people were people who were sharing a residence with an adult child in 18 years of age or older, who were obviously, like I mentioned before, they themselves were 65 years of age or older. And this was all, the data was collected through telephone interviews that lasted approximately 30 minutes, and they covered areas such as the respondent's physical health, the respondent's ability to perform activities of daily living, the satisfaction with relationship between both the family member and the friends, and between the child. And in cases when a telephone interview was not possible, respondents would be interviewed in person. So that's just something to know. And that is basically it for the for the methods. And now onto the results. So one of the major findings of this article was that they found they did find support for two of the three hypotheses regarding the effects of social structure positions, but they found no support for the hypothesis regarding the effects of exchange and dependency. So now to go into what that means, because so basically they found that parent-adult-child conflict was significantly lower in dyads in which the resident child was older, and in which the parent and child occupied the same similar marital status. So those are two things that they did guess about the child's age and the child's marital status that ended up being correct. And then they also found contrary to what they expected, that conflict was not higher in dyads involving fathers and sons than any other gender combinations. And this was also, and there was also, they also found no support in the data, for the hypothesis that they had made about the parent's health and the parent's dependency, or the length of co-residency affecting the parent-child conflict. The major findings of this data and analysis were that unexpectedly low rates of parent-child conflict was one. There was low rates of parent-child conflict unexpectedly. There was a lot of relative importance of social structure positions when explaining that the conflict that did exist between the elderly parent, and the adult residing child. And the relative unimportance of parents' health and dependency on that adult child. And then they also found, as I have mentioned already, that both the low levels of conflict and the relative unimportance of gender, health, and dependency may have resulted from the choice that parents and children, and from the perceptions of equity that they may have experienced in the living arrangement. So basically he's basically saying that the results can be very varied, because it all really depends on the specific characteristics of that living arrangement and of that specific family. So he says that the reasons for the lack of support and some of the hypotheses that they have made, because like I said before, they made these hypotheses based on previous research. So now if they didn't find support for that hypothesis, that means that this this hypothesis that they made here doesn't add up to the findings of a previous research. And basically what that means is that when it comes to researching marriages and families and parent and child, it can all be very varied due to the fact that it all depends on the specific characteristics that deal with that specific living arrangement and that specific parent and that specific child and that specific relationship. So that's basically what the major finding of this article was.